Namam Vishnupadaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Shrimati Bhaktivedanta Swami Nityanamane Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Prachadane Nirvashesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarane Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasri Gaurabhakta Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So this is a summary of Upadeshamrita, work by Srila Rupa Goswami. It is a very short work, but nevertheless we'll do a summary of a very short work. And the previous 2 days I covered the first 7 verses, which discussed unfavorable elements such as desire and hatred, or anger, and temptations of the tongue and words and stomach, etc., which created various anarthas for us. And also Rupa Goswami mentions positive elements which are favorable for bhakti. And then he went on to discuss the different types of association of devotees, which is very powerful to influence us to take to the process of bhakti and to develop our bhakti. And he also discussed the various ways in which we can respect the devotees. We respect the less advanced devotees in one way, and we give more respect to those who are serious, and we give most respect to those who are very advanced. And then he, in verse 7, discussed how we have to avoid aparad, 6 of us. We have to avoid aparads against the devotees because it will cause a big problem in our devotional service, and that by constantly chanting the name sincerely, we can get rid of all the obstacles, including the aparads, just like we get rid of sickness, jaundice, which is a disease in which sugar tastes bitter. But if we take sugar, eventually we get cured and we can taste the sweetness of the sugar. So by continually chanting the holy name, we get rid of all of our offenses and obstacles, and eventually the taste for the name becomes very, very sweet. So, continuing on that, Rupa Goswami gives an instruction on how to cultivate the holy name. So this is the translation. One should spend all one's time engaging the mind and tongue in remembering and glorifying Krishna's name, form, and pastimes, living in Vraja and in following the footsteps of the great devotees with great love for Krishna. This is a general instruction involving mind, engage the mind in remembering the Lord and his name, form, and pastimes, etc., and glorifying Krishna, doing kirtan. And of course, one can do many other activities as well. So performing devotional service of many types for the Lord, living in the holy dham of Vrindavan. This is an anga of bhakti also, and following the footsteps of the great devotees. So these are guidelines for our devotional service, which all serious devotees should follow. Particularly, of course, they are prominent in what we call Raganuga sadhana. So in Nectar of Devotion, Rupa Goswami discusses 2 types of sadhana bhakti, both of which will lead to bhava and then to prema. So we have the Vaidhi bhakti, or Vaidhi sadhana, and Raganuga sadhana. So both are sadhanas. Sometimes devotees make a mistake and they think that Raganuga means prema, but no, this is only a sadhana which will lead to prema. So it's a particular type of sadhana. And Vaidhi sadhana also is a type of sadhana and will also lead to prema. So both lead to prema. So what's the difference? If we look in Chaitanya Charitamrita, we'll find that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu says that we have to do Raganuga sadhana if we want to realize Krishna in Vrindavan. So if we do Vaidhi sadhana, then what happens? We could also attain Krishna if our goal is Krishna, but when we get prema, our prema will be influenced by that Vaidhi Bhakti. So we will have great reverence for Krishna, thinking of the Supreme Lord. So we'll realize Krishna, but as Supreme Lord. But that is not suitable for Vrindavan, because all the people of Vrindavan do not see Krishna as Supreme Lord. Whereas in Raganuga sadhana, one practices like the people of Vrindavan, not seeing Krishna as Supreme Lord, and with that lack of reverence. So those who do Raganuga sadhana are qualified to attain prema and enter into the pastimes in Vrindavan. Those who practice Vaidhi sadhana will have this influence of veneration, awe, seeing Krishna as Supreme Lord. So they're not qualified for that place in the spiritual world, Vrindavan, but they can go to other places such as Dwarka, where Krishna is also resides, but everyone there sees Krishna also as Supreme Lord. So you can realize Krishna, but in a different place. There's another little explanation. Well, I worship Krishna, and I worship Krishna in Vrindavan, but I worship him in Vaidhi Bhakti, and I'm not aspiring to see Krishna in Dwarka at all. So why would I end up in Dwarka? So the answer is, you can also realize Krishna in Vrindavan with veneration, but it's completely separate from the Vrindavan where the people don't see Krishna as God. So this is called Aishvarya Goloka. So it's another Goloka where Krishna, everyone there, all the inhabitants of Vrindavan see Krishna as Supreme Lord. So it's kind of a halfway between Dwarka Krishna and Vrindavan Krishna. So that would be the result of continuing with Vaidhi sadhana, then attaining bhava and prema for Krishna, who was worshipped in a Vrindavan form. So there's a little bit of a difference there. So anyway, as I say, the Raganuga sadhana has these elements, so many elements of bhakti, but in Raganuga, some of these elements become quite prominent. One is chanting the name of the Lord, which is external. Another is remembering the Lord. That's internal, using our mind. Of course, we could do this in sadhana also, but these become very prominent in Raganuga sadhana. So constant chanting and constant remembering Krishna, his names, his form, his pastimes, etc. So there's a lot of internal sadhana in Raganuga sadhana. And, of course, the remembrance of Krishna as Krishna and his pastimes in Vrindavan. So therefore one will remember Krishna and all of his pastimes, which are mentioned in the first part of the 10th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. So that remembrance may also become more detailed. So there's something called the Astakaliya Leela, or Krishna's pastimes with Radha and the gopis during 8 parts of the day, from early morning to late morning to noon to afternoon to evening to night and to midnight, I guess. So there's 8 parts of the day, and in the 8 parts of the day, Krishna has various pastimes with the gopis and Radha. So one of the remembrances, you could remember these pastimes of Radha and Krishna during the 8 parts of the day. For our convenience, different acharyas like Krishna's Kaviraj and Vishnu Chakravarti Thakur and Kavikarnapura have written a summary of those pastimes of Krishna in 8 parts of the day. So one can meditate on those various pastimes in various parts of the day. So this helps one's remembrance. So this is the internal service. Another Anga Bhakti, one which is very powerful and is mentioned among the 5 most important Angas of Bhakti, is living in the holy Dham. And this is even one of the Angas for Vaidhi Bhakti as well. One could also live in Vrindavan. But it is quite prominent for people practicing Raganuga Bhakti because they are aspiring to enter into the spiritual world, Vrindavan in the spiritual world. So by living in Vrindavan in this world, they are able to remember that place more. So there's an emphasis upon living in the holy Dham. They follow in the footsteps of the Brajabasis. This is the meaning of Rag Anuga. Anuga means to follow after or to follow behind. And Raga refers to the spontaneous love expressed by the people of Vrindavan. So the people of Vrindavan have something called Ragatmaka Bhakti. Bhakti filled with raga, spontaneous type of love. That could be of various forms. It could be Sakya, Dasya, Vatsalya, or Madhurya. So one should follow after any of these persons of Vrindavan and admire and aspire for a similar type of devotional service in that spontaneous mood. So that's called Raganuga Bhakti, following after the inhabitants of Vrindavan and the spiritual world. Now, they all have this spontaneous devotional service where they don't see Krishna as Supreme Lord, and they simply serve him out of great love. So that's obviously something which is practiced in Raganuga Bhakti. There are different stages of Raganuga sadhana. The first stage is simply hearing. The state of hearing very nicely. So one hears, of course, about the pastimes, etc. One hears about the sadhana, how to practice Raganuga Bhakti, and what is the goal. And it also includes hearing the holy name and chanting the holy name without offense, as much as one can. That's the first stage, so it's more or less hearing and chanting and whatever. Second stage is called Varanadasa, which literally means acceptance, which involves chanting purely, and a guru, maybe one's Diksha Guru or Shiksha Guru, gives detailed instructions on how to worship in the mind the forms of Radha and Krishna and Vrindavan in one's spiritual body. So, of course, right now we have a material body, but we have an aspiration to serve Krishna in the spiritual world. And to do so, we have to take a spiritual body. So if you're in the spiritual world and you serve Krishna in Sakya Rasa as a friend in the spiritual world, you cannot serve in the body we have now. You would have to have a cowherd boy body. Or if you're to serve as a gopi in the spiritual world, you cannot serve in the body that you have here. You would have to take a female form of cowherd girl. So therefore, in this Varnadas, you start meditating on serving Radha and Krishna in that spiritual form, under the instructions of Guru. So that's called Varnadasa. Smaranadasa. Smarana means remembering. So here one has more concentration. In Sravana we're hearing more, and in Smaranadasa then we begin to meditate on the pastimes of Krishna, in which Krishna's having pastimes with the various persons in Vrindavan. It could be the gopis or the cowherd boys or Mother Yasoda, etc. So we start remembering the various pastimes. At this other point, of course, Varnadasa, generally you choose a certain person who has a certain rasa, and you follow that particular person. So if you're in Sakya Rasa, then you may follow Subal. Or if you're in Madhurya Rasa, you'll follow some Manjari, like Rupa, Manjari, etc. So according to your choice of rasa, then you will choose a particular person and start serving that person and performing service to Radha and Krishna just as they do. So when we come to this Smaranadasa, and then this is when the remembrance of those pastimes and serving in those pastimes begin. But in the beginning, Smarana, the mind wanders. If we come to the stage of Dharana, the mind does not wander. If we come to the stage of Dhyana, that means the mind is fully engaged. And Anusmriti means, of course, constant Dhyana. Samadhi means complete absorption. So at that time we actually realize our true spiritual form with Radha and Krishna. So those are the various stages. Of course, the last stages will actually be beyond sadhana. So apanadasa. We have the material body, but then we're serving in our spiritual form because we have a realization of Krishna in bhava. And then we serve Krishna. So how do we serve Krishna? We have to serve him not with a material body, but with our spiritual body. So at this point, we actually have developed the spiritual body, and we serve Krishna in that spiritual body, even though we have a material body. And sampatidasa, or prapanadasa, or vastasthiti means we give up the material body completely, and all that's left is the spiritual body. And then we're in the spiritual world. We serve Krishna in that form. So in the sadhana stage, it's not actually the spiritual body, it's our aspired for spiritual body. And we're meditating on serving Krishna in that. When we get to bhava, then we actually, that sarups begins to manifest. And in prema, it's fully manifest. And then finally, we give up the material body completely, and we just serve in the spiritual body. So these are kind of the steps in beginning to serve Krishna with your spiritual body in the spiritual world. Okay, so that's the sadhana aspect. So you do raga nuga sadhana, and from that you'll progress to bhava, and then to prema. So in text 9, Rupa Goswami then begins to praise Mathura, the area of Mathura. In the previous verse, we saw that one of the activities of the devotee was to live in Braja, live in the holy Dham. So he takes up that theme in verse 9. So, the holy place known as Mathura is spiritually superior to Vaikuntha. Superior to Mathura is the transcendental forest of Vrindavan because of Krishna's Ras Leela. Superior to the forest of Vrindavan is Govardhan Hill, for it was raised by the divine hand of Krishna and was the site of his various loving pastimes. Like that. And above all, the excellent Radha-kun stands supreme, for it is overflooded with the amorous prema of Krishna. Where then is that intelligent person who was unwilling to serve this Radha-kun at the foot of Govardhan Hill? So in this way, Rupa Goswami's praising the holy Dham, but then he's, of course, praising it as superior to Vaikuntha. Why? Because within this Mathura area, we will have the pastimes of Krishna, which are very sweet, and superior to the pastimes in Vaikuntha, which are full of awe and reverence. Even though they have prema there, there is reverence there. If we have the pastimes of Krishna in Vrindavan, then there is no reverence there, so the sweetness is fully manifested. Of course, the whole area of Mathura is wonderful because Krishna was born in Mathura, then he lived in Vrindavan. But Mathura actually is inferior to Vrindavan proper because Mathura still has that element of veneration. For instance, Vasudeva and Devaki live there, and they see Krishna as Supreme Lord as well as being their son. So there's reverence there. So superior to Mathura is forest of Vrindavan. So in Vrindavan we have many pastimes, and the most outstanding pastime of all is the Rasa Leela. So there are many pastimes of Krishna, many of which are described in Srimad Bhagavatam, but we have 5 chapters dedicated to one pastime, the Rasa Leela. So this is considered to be the super excellent pastime of Krishna, the outstanding pastime which is no other form of the Lord comes near to performing. The very unique pastime of Krishna. So, Forest of Vrindavan, very nice because of Ras Leela. So we think nothing higher than that. But Rupa Goswami says, well, within Vrindavan, then we have Govardhan Hill. And in that Govardhan Hill, we have, of course, pastimes of Krishna also. He also raised it with his hand. As we have there. But many other pastimes with the cowherds. Krishna used to herd his calves and cows in Govardhan Hill along with the cowherd boys. But also there are pastimes with the gopis. So Krishna would meet the gopis on Govardhan Hill and go into the caves, etc. But at the base of Govardhan Hill is Radha Kund. So this place is the most worshipable of all because it's overflooded with the prema of Krishna, the very sweet prema of Krishna. So this place, Krishna has very sweet pastimes with the gopis and particularly Radharani. So because of the glorification of Radha and Krishna's love, this place is considered to be the supreme place. So, as I mentioned, the different activities, prominent activities of Raganuga Bhakti were hearing, chanting, worshiping the Lord, association, and then living in the Dham. So in this verse, living in the Dham is especially emphasized. And we see that many devotees following these instructions go to Vrindavan area and take up residence and seriously practice their devotional service. So the Dham in any case is wonderful, but there are even more wonderful parts of the Dham depending on the different pastimes. So we have the whole area of Vrindavan, of Mathura, and then within that we have Vrindavan, and then within Vrindavan we have Govardhan Hill, and right next to Govardhan Hill is Radha Kund. So this Radha Kund is like the most concentrated form of Madhurya Rasa in the whole spiritual world. So that's why Radha Kund is selected here. We see in Chaitanya Charitamrita that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu went to Vrindavan, or the whole area actually, and he toured the different forests and saw all the different places there. And then he was asking everyone, where is Radha Kund? So he was very interested to come to that place especially. And eventually he did find it, but it was actually just a paddy field full of rice and water. But he identified this place as Radha Kund. So after that, then they began to excavate the place, and the Kund was there, and they established various buildings around the place. And of course, right next to it is Shama Kund. And involved the whole, there's a whole story of how Radha Kund appeared, because after Krishna had killed the bull demon, Aristasura, then he had to do some penance to get rid of killing a cow, or a bull, who was the husband of the cow. So he built Shama Kund, and then in competition, Radha built Radha Kund. So we got the two Kundas appearing for that reason, for the pastime of Krishna. So Chaitanya Mahaprabhu fell in love with this particular Kund, and was crying and fainting, etc., when he saw the place. So a very, very wonderful, sacred place. So any place to live in the holy Dham is very wonderful, but if we choose that most sacred place, then it has even more power. Okay, next verse. So we had superiority of Radha Kund over all other places. So now we have another series of comparisons of one person superior to the next. So we have different processes mentioned in the scriptures, starting with Karma Yoga, and then Jnana Yoga, Stanga Yoga, and Bhakti Yoga. And because they're all scriptural, they will all be praised in the scripture. So in some places, Karma Yoga is praised. And in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna also praises Karma Yoga in chapter 3. So you can practice it. But it's not considered to be the ultimate process. So there are higher processes. So that is why Rupa Goswami says superior to those who practice karma yoga, the karmis, are the gyanis who practice jnana yoga. So jnana yoga is favored by the Lord more than karma yoga because at least we're understanding about Atma different from body. So it's spiritual in that sense. But superior to the jnanis who realize Atma are the devotees who give up the process of jnana. Why are they superior? Because not only they understand about Atma, they also accept Supreme Lord with his form, qualities, and activities. So we have various grades of devotees. Previously, Rupa Goswami described various types of devotees. We have the Kanishta, one who maybe chants a little bit, so we offer mental respect to that person. One who is initiated, seriously practicing and chanting constantly, we give good respect to that person. We, not just mentally, but physically will offer respects. And to the advanced devotee, then we actually come and we receive teachings from him and offer him great respects. So there are different types of devotees. But all these devotees are superior to the jnanis. But among the devotees, one who has attained prema, that he's done sadhana, gone through bhava, and attained prema, then he is superior to that. But among those who have prema, then there are varieties. We have devotees with prema in Vaikuntha or in Ayodhya. They have prema for Ramchandra, etc. Those who have prema for Krishna are considered to be superior. But then there are many devotees of Krishna. We have devotees in Mathura, devotees in Dwarka, devotees in Vrindavan. So the devotees in Vrindavan are considered to be the best because this is the most intimate prema, the sweetest prema, without any aishvarya, without any mood of reverence. But even in Vrindavan, with that sweet prema, there are also gradations of devotees. And the most intense relationship and sweetest relationship is that of the gopis with Krishna in Madhurya Rasa. That's considered to be the highest. And then, among the gopis, there's also various types of gopis, various groups of gopis, and each group may have millions of gopis in them, and we have so many groups. And they all have different types of Madhurya Rasa, and various intensities. The topmost is Radha. She's at the top, very, very top of Madhurya Rasa. So, she is the topmost, and then where is her pastimes? At Radhakund. So that's why we worship Radhakund, because she's the topmost devotee of Krishna. So in this way, Rupa Goswami shows the superiority of bhakti, and then bhakti in Vrindavan, and Madhurya Rasa, and finally the bhakti of Radha as being the topmost of all. So by indicating living in Radhakund, he not only indicates a place to live, but he also begins to glorify Radharani. So Radha, of course, does not exist alone. She also has her group. So usually we see pictures, there's Radha and there's whole groups of gopis. Of course, sometimes there are different types, but Radha has her own particular group, and that whole group is considered to be superior to all the other types of gopis. So it's not just Radha, but her whole group. So we have Lalita, Vishaka, and so many other gopis in the group. So they are considered to be superior to all the other gopis. So there was glorification of the Dhamma. This is one of the elements of sadhana, and particularly of Raganuga Bhakti. And living in the Dhamma was ultimately the best place was Radhakund, And then Radha Kund is best because Radha is the greatest devotee. So the next verse then describes that love of Radha, her prema. What's so wonderful about her prema? Huh? Of all the lovable gopis, Radha is the dearest in every respect. Her kunda is described by great sages as similarly dear to him. That prema is very rarely attained even by the greatest devotees. Therefore, it is even more difficult for ordinary devotees to attain. So it's very rare. But if one simply bathes once within those holy waters, one's prema, similar to Radha's, is fully aroused. So why do we go to Radha Kund? Because you can easily get that type of prema by bathing in Radha Kund, as Chaitanya Mahaprabhu did. So we should aspire, therefore, for that type of prema. So Radha Kund is non-different from Radha. In the spiritual world, we have Radha, we have Krishna, and they are individuals, but objects also are non-different from them. Just as Krishna and his name are non-different, Radha and her name are non-different, so Radha and her kunda are non-different. So by associating with a kunda, this will help us develop realization of Radha. This is by associating with Krishna's name, we can realize Krishna. So by associating and living in Radha Kund, we can also begin to develop realization of Radha and her prema. So this is we can say, an easy process of beginning to develop that prema. So, what do we do when we stay at that place? Of course, one can bathe in Radha Kund, but one should practice one's sadhana there. And what was the sadhana? Of course, we should chant continually. And the other is smarana, to remember. So we can, in our mind, we can serve in our siddha, our spiritual body, Radha, the gopis, the place, etc. And by doing so, then eventually we actually realize our spiritual body, give up the material body, and go to the spiritual world. So there are different stages. Generally, we just use the word prema and say prema is prayojana, or the goal. But actually, there are different stages within prema. So the first stage is called rati, or bhava. And this will develop into prema, which is stronger. And even if there's causes for interrupting or destroying that prema, it will never be destroyed. It overcomes all obstacles. But more intense than that is something called sneha, which literally means affection. So at this stage, the heart begins to melt. So one's emotions, spiritual emotions, become very, very liquid. And there's a lot of familiarity there. Particularly in Madhurya Rasa, then there is a development of man, or anger. This is spiritual anger. So there will be a display of anger at Krishna because of his activities. And then there's more intense love called pranaya, which is intimate affection, very intimate and close affection. And stronger than that is something called raga, which is intense pranaya, intense intimacy with great joy on meeting Krishna. And even more intense than that is anuraga. And one experiences Krishna in newer ways at all time. So these are the various levels of intensity of prema. And particularly in Madhurya Rasa, the later ones are manifested. And ultimately the highest one is called Mahabhava. So this is anuraga with intense satvika bhavas, ecstatic symptoms. And of all the people, characters, Radharani shows the most intense Mahabhava, some of the symptoms of which are not showed by anybody else. So technically it is called Adiruda Bhava, very intense Sattvika Bhavas. And then we get something called Modana, and in that, in separation, we get something called Divyonmada, or divine madness. So this is displayed by Radharani when she meets Uddhava, and then she begins talking to a bumblebee and thinking this is a messenger from Krishna. So this is intense divine madness, or Divyonmada. So various levels are there. And according to rasa, then we'll get various, these things are manifested at different degrees. So in dasya rasa, we'll get up to prema. But in sakya rasa, there's more intensity and familiarity with sneha. And if we get to vatsalya raga, particularly in yasoda, then raga becomes very prominent and continuous. And then in madhurya rasa, we get man and pranaya and anuraga. And then finally mahabhava. So these last stages, man, pranaya, anuraga, and mahabhava, are displayed in madhurya rasa. But the upper stages, like mahabhava, we will not see in the, there's madhurya rasa with the queens of Dwarka, Krishna and the queens of Dwarka, but they will never experience mahabhava. So this is only the gopis. And then finally we get Radharani with Adiruda Bhava. So increasingly more intense prema. These are just names of that, different stages. So Radha as the topmost, with the topmost experience of love, topmost ecstasies, most intense sweet love. And then her place is Radha Kund. So we get various levels according to the type of rasa. And we get finally Madhurya rasa. Oh, okay, that's the end. Fine. Okay, so we see that we only have a limited number of verses here. We get up to verse 13 or 11 or whatever, up to 11, whatever. But through that we get to the highest stage, that is describing Radha. These details are more elaborately described in Ujjvala Nilamani. There's some description in Nectar Devotion, or Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, but we get much more details of Madhurya Rasa and these different stages in Ujjvala Nilamani, another work by Rupa Goswami. So together, these two works, Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu and Ujjvala Nilamani, they are the primary presentation of rasa for the followers of Lord Chaitanya. But we'll find here a concentrated form in Upadesha Amrita, a very concentrated form with only some of the indications of this prema, whatever. Okay, any question there? Mm-hmm.
Chanting in Sudanam and experiencing prema. You can't go back unless you've got that. You can't go back. Prabhupada says, like beginning of 4th canto, you can't go back in one lifetime.
Yeah.
So sometimes it sounds quite achievable, and other times insurmountable.
Yeah.
So how to understand these sort of different statements?
So by the mercy of Guru and Krishna, anything is possible. And we do see there is something called Kripa Siddhi. So by the mercy of Krishna or a great devotee, you can advance very quickly, and in one lifetime or even less than one lifetime, you can attain the ultimate goal. And Krishna also so merciful that even if you have zero prema and no sadhana and you're a big demon, Krishna kills you. You can go to the spiritual world also. So there are all sorts of ways in which you can go to the spiritual world, one of which is the mercy of Krishna, or even a great devotee. Narada Muni gives prema or bhava in 3 months to Mrigari the hunter, for instance, very quickly advances. So it is possible, but the general course, it may take a little longer. And we see in the case of Bharat, he was in bhava stage, but then he fell down and became a deer. Then he became Jad Bharat. Then he got prema. Then he went to the spiritual world. So 3 lifetimes from bhava. So therefore, generally, we say it'll take a little more long than 1 lifetime. But the devotee doesn't really mind that, because he's more interested in simply continuing his service to Krishna. And he never demands that it has to be quicker or whatever. So the reasoning behind this, why it's a little bit slow, from our point of view at least, is slow, is that when the devotion matures nicely, then the final result is better, as with fruit. So we can artificially ripen the fruit, but if it's naturally ripened, it's sweeter. It may take time, but you get a sweeter final result. So therefore, when you do your sadhana, and I may go over several lifetimes, and you keep developing, then the final prema is very, very sweet and a little bit different because of that. So we see, like in the case of Putana, Krishna killed Putana, and then she went to the spiritual world, but because she had given poison from her breast, and it was kind of like a mother, then she got Vatsalya Rasa kind of in the spiritual world. But it was actually not direct Vatsalya, it was a little bit indirect, because she was not actually like a mother, she was just a nurse. And whatever she attained was far inferior to any devotee who practices Vatsalya in sadhana and then attains the result. So he gets something, but it is not so good as one who actually does the full process of sadhana, bhava, prema seriously. So we could get quick results by mercy, but it may not be the same as the gradual result.
You were giving an example of education by association with saintly persons to understand the rasa. Do you know of Prabhupada personally giving instruction to any of his disciples in this manner?
I don't think so. The best we get instructions are only through something like Chaitanya Charitamrita. That's the closest we get there.
Yeah.
And he didn't encourage it also so much.
But a number of devotees went elsewhere because other people were
saying we got something higher.
Oh, yeah. But Prabhupada never gave this to...
Yeah. And even those who read Chaitanya Charitamrita said, okay, we got to develop this rasa, so let's get together and talk about Radha and Krishna. And then when Prabhupada found out about it, he said, stop this. It's because they were not ready for it. Yeah. So if you're not qualified for Raga Nuga and whatever, then you don't do it. When you're ready, Guru will encourage you.
Yes.
Maharaj, you're talking about bathing in Radha Kund, and that if you bathe in Radha Kund even once, you develop prema similar to that of Radha.
Yeah.
What happened?
Why do we bathe there? We don't
I've
get
bathed
prema.
Many times, nothing's changed. At least I can't perceive any change.
Yeah. Well, of course, we see other statements also. You simply chant the holy name once, you're more qualified than a brahmana, even if you're a dog eater, or simply chanting once, you get to the spiritual world, whatever. And then we have statements. One of the aparads is, don't consider any of the statements concerning the holy name to be exaggeration or imagination. So therefore, we cannot disregard any of these statements that it's untrue or whatever. But it also, we should if we carefully read these statements, yes, it is true. At the same time, we see that sometimes it may not be immediate. It happens, but it may not be instantaneous or whatever. But at least the process has started. So we begin bathing once in Radha Kund, as it says here, prema dam sakrit api. Even once bathing there gives prema. So, it doesn't actually say that you're immediately going to get prema. But you bathe there once, you get prema. So it may take some time. But it's guaranteed if you do that with great devotion and whatever. Obviously, because of that, the power of that place, will get the inspiration to achieve it eventually. So it's not that it happens immediately, but it happens.
Thank you. And the other question I have is, in one of the slides, it mentions about Vastu Siddhi. What's Vastu Siddhi?
That means when you no longer have a material body and you just have a spiritual body. Whereas before that, we have a material body, we also have a spiritual body, but because we're living in the material world, and when we die, then we give up the material body, we only have the spiritual body. So Vastu Siddhi is your identity beyond the material world with no connection at all. Whereas what we do have, we like Jivan Muktas, we're in the material world with the material body. It's somewhat of an impediment because we still have to deal with the material world, and they're subject to, hot weather, cold weather, food, breathing, thirst, whatever like that. So there's a little bit of an obstacle to your prema at that time, but still perfection. But there's an obstacle because we're serving in our spiritual body. We still got a material body, so there's a little bit of obstacle there.
Hare Krishna Maharaj, just one little thing. Srila Prabhupada did advise the brahmacharis to think of Rasa Leela when they were having sex desire. Srila Prabhupada advised the brahmacharis that they should think of the Rasa Leela when they were having sex desire. It seems so sort of far apart. Now, I really wanted to ask about this Aishvarya Goloka, because we never hear Srila Prabhupada mention that there's another planet where we worship, but without that spontaneous Raganuga, where Krishna is worshipped.
This is mentioned by Vishnu Chakravarti in one place, in one of his commentaries, because he says, if we worship Krishna from Raganuga sadhana, and then we follow after the inhabitants of Vrindavan, then naturally we go to Vrindavan and our Goloka in the spiritual world. And but then he says, well, I'm worshiping Krishna, cowherd boy, with flute and playing with the cows, etc. But I'm doing Invadi Bhakti. Where would I go? So then we can say, well, Dwarka. Because in Dwarka it's Krishna, same Krishna, but it's Aishvarya. But the problem is that I'm worshiping Krishna with the flute and playing with the cows, and in Dwarka he doesn't do that, so why would I go there? So then he says, well, there's another place where you got the form of Krishna as the cowherd boy with all the associates, but there's the awe and reverence there. So that's like an intermediate between Dwarka and Vrindavan, where it's still a cowherd boy, but there's awe and reverence. It's that you'll go to that place. Yeah.
Haribol Maharaj, just one question with Radha Kun. I've heard so many different ways of bathing. I've been told you should not put your feet in Radha Kun, you shouldn't completely immerse. In the early days, many years ago, with Krishna Das Babaji, the very, very early days in the 70s, and he said, no, you don't completely immerse in Radha Kun. So, what was the most appropriate way not to commit offence? Is one of my question. And the other question was, when I was at Radha Kun, one of the sadhus wanted to take my japa beads and dump them into Radha Kund, And Srila Prabhupada, when I took initiation and I'd gone upstairs to get to Gayatri, at the same time he told me never to let anyone touch my initiated beads. He was very specific about it. So we had a bit of a, I just said, no touching. Anyway, finally we made I wrapped them in my bead bag and he dumped them in, but I didn't want to make offence to him at the same time in Radha Kund. So I'm just wondering which way, if that was the right way to do it. And then the other thing about the bathing, what is the most appropriate way to...
Well, it says bathing, but then, of course, bathing can take many forms. And I think probably the principle is we should not disrespect the place also. So we start sticking our feet in, splashing our water, and swimming around. Obviously, that's not good. And Prabhupada also didn't encourage that. So I think in the early days, or in the Lord Chaitanya's time, they would actually just dunk their head in or something like that, so that much respect they show.
Yeah.
Or they sprinkle the water on their head.
Yeah, that's
so that's another way of bathing also.
Yeah,
so that's the way we
I
can do
usually
it.
do. Yeah.
As for the beads, beads are associated with mantra, and of course, mantra not only Hare Krishna, but with our other mantras for Diksha, etc. And generally, in tradition, you shouldn't reveal your mantra to anybody else. So that's why they also cover the beads, because. But that was, the other mantra, the second initiation. You don't, and then you would hide them, because otherwise, the effect is less and less. So that's maybe what Prabhupada is taking there. That don't let other people touch your beads.
He was very specific about it at that time. Yeah.
Just a comment on the bathing. My mom said that she was once at Radhakund, and there were some Russian devotees, a whole group, and they were holding each other by the feet and dunking them in.
Okay. Another way of doing it. That's it. Yeah. Okay. Nothing else. Oh. No.
Hare Krishna, for Gayatri Mantra, before we were always hiding the hand, but now more and more we just don't hide the hand when you are chanting Gayatri Mantra. So what is the way to do?
What's the question about the Gayatri Mantra?
Yeah, when you are chanting, before when we were chanting Gayatri Mantra, we were always hiding our hand. Hiding.
Oh, yeah. You don't show your fingers.
But now we don't do it anymore. So what is the
proper
way to do?
Well, it's said that when you chant your mantras, it should be hidden.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the scriptural rule.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, that's it. Okay. Hare Krishna. We're going directly